Climbing into the cockpit, I strapped myself into the ejection seat, feeling the weight of my gear as I adjusted the harness. The cockpit was a tight fit, filled with switches, gauges, and displays that I had become intimately familiar with during my training. I ran through the startup sequence, each step ingrained in my memory. When I hit the engine start button, the jet came to life with a roar, the Rolls-Royce Pegasus engine's vibrations humming through the airframe. My instructor was in a chase plane, ready to guide me through this first flight. The plan was to conduct a conventional takeoff, get a feel for the jet in forward flight, and then attempt some basic maneuvers before returning for a vertical landing. With the engine running and all systems checked, I taxied the Harrier to the runway. The view from the cockpit was different from the other jets I'd flown. The Harrier sat higher, and the thought of what this aircraft could do kept my senses on high alert. As I lined up on the runway, I took a deep breath, focusing on the task ahead. I'd trained for this moment, and now it was time to prove I was ready. "Cleared for takeoff," came the voice over the radio. I pushed the throttle forward, and the Harrier surged down the runway. The acceleration was powerful, but what struck me was the smoothness of the ride. In no time, the wheels left the ground, and I was airborne. The Harrier was unlike anything I had flown before. The controls were responsive, almost eager, as if the jet wanted to be pushed to its limits. I took the aircraft up to altitude, where the real work would begin. At altitude, I started with some basic maneuvers, gentle turns, climbs, and descents. The Harrier handled beautifully with a stability that belied its reputation as a tricky aircraft. But there was also a sense of raw power under my control, a reminder that this was a jet designed for combat. The instructor's voice crackled over the radio, guiding me through the maneuvers. "Looking good, but remember, the Harrier can be unforgiving. Stay ahead of the jet." After a few more maneuvers, it was time to head to the hover area. This was the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading: hovering. Bringing the Harrier to a hover was a delicate dance, balancing thrust, nozzle angle, and attitude all at once. I reduced speed and began transitioning the nozzles downward, feeling the jet start to slow. The controls became more sensitive as the forward motion bled off, and soon I was in a hover. The sensation was surreal, flying a jet like a helicopter, suspended in the air by pure thrust. It took everything I had to keep the jet steady, every small movement of the stick or throttle resulting in a noticeable change in the aircraft's attitude. The hover wasn't perfect. I drifted slightly, and there were a few wobbles, but I managed to hold it. The instructor chimed in, "Not bad for a first try. You're getting the hang of it."